I'm Hayley. This is Adriana. We just wanted to start by welcoming everybody to the Southern Catskills, our little homestead. Also wanted to thank Kettle Space for having us. So a little bit about me. I'm Hayley. I'm a third-year herbal medicine student at Arborvitae School of Traditional Herbal Medicine in Brooklyn. Recently came up here because of the pandemic to the Catskills, and I'm gonna stay here permanently, I hope. Yeah, and basically a little bit my background. I have a background in public health. I've worked in like clinical and hospital and nonprofit settings. Herbalism really provided like a more holistic view of health for me, kind of tied in social justice, healthcare, and environmentalism. So that's about me. And then
hello. As Hayley said, I'm Adriana. We are friends from Arborvitae. As she said, we're third years from a potential 3-year program. My background is in botanical and floral design. I was a project manager at an urban garden design company. And I have a certificate in horticulture from the Brooklyn Botanic Garden, and I'm an interior and exterior horticulturist. And yeah, my biggest love being herbal medicine, which, you know, we're really excited to impart some knowledge or have a discussion about today, and ongoing. So yeah, for everyone who just arrived, we will be having questions in the chat box again. And we will check those out as we go when we have pauses and time to do that. And yeah.
Before we get started, we just wanted to sort of recognize our privilege as white cis women on this land and being able to just like harvest freely and forage freely. Not everyone is able to do that, whether it's because of certain laws or because of, you know, pesticide treatment in like city parks. So we just wanted to recognize that. And because of this walk, we've been kind of diving into like the history of foraging laws. And a lot of the laws have their roots in like racism and colonialism and were formed around the time of the Civil War.
Yeah, and something just like as a brief history, in the time of colonialism to the early 1800s, laws actually protected foragers because the foragers at that time were primarily white settlers. And once previously enslaved folks got liberated, laws began to be implemented by southern plantation owners to restrict their freedom and autonomy that they were starting to gain from foraging and selling their own, you know, products by using their foraging skills that they had. So they wanted to take that power away from them and increase their dependency on the southern plantain owners. So yeah, knowing that and realizing that that's a really important conversation and point to make to dive into greater discussions on like how to change the foundation of that by deconstructing it. And yeah, we can talk about that sort of like like how that can apply to like urban settings in a positive way in the future, and maybe some questions that can arise from that. Later.
Yeah, ultimately herbalism and foraging like can sort of closen your relationship with the land, and ultimately like be a tool for conservation. So with that, let's get it started.
Oh, quick disclaimer, we are not physicians. We are providing all of this information on herbal medicine as an educational component. We are speaking in generalities, and we do not condone the use of any of these for you in particular, because it may not apply to you in your body.
Yes. So we don't have to go very far for our first plant. This is yellow dock, also known by its botanical name Rumex crispus. This is a pretty easy one to identify, and our assistant, Pepita, is here to help us. So the most like notable thing about it is its curly leaves, the sort of wavy margins of the leaves, and their lance shape. So it's another nickname for it is curly dock, and you can see why. This one's like right about to flower, and it's a biennial, so it takes 2 years to reach its maturity. So this one's definitely in its second year, and we have a past yellow dock plant right next to it. So another way to like identify plants is if there's like a past growth right next to it. This is what the yellow dock past growth looks like. It's got this rusty color and it's gone to seed. So we have the seeds right there and it's pretty like woody. Mm-hmm. So this sort of has a doctrine of signatures, which is basically the plant's way of communicating with us. It's like its color, scent, texture, sort of tells us what part of the body it can treat or what ailment it can treat. So in this case, we have like a red stalk, and sometimes you'll see they have like a red midrib. There is like a little bit here. So this red stalk here, and that's because of yellow dock's affinity with the blood. It's a blood builder. It's a classic remedy for anemia. It assists with iron absorption. So this whole thing is edible, but the root is what you're going to use for, obviously we can't see that now, is what you're going to use for a remedy. You can harvest the root either in the spring of its second year or the fall of its first year. And the root is going to be like a yellowy color. So that points to its affinity for the liver and bile. So it is like a liver detoxifier, as well as it's like helps to absorb iron. So it can be great for like skin ailments like psoriasis, eczema, acne, any like sort of excess hormones. It'll like gently help detoxify the liver. So yeah, it's all edible. Seeds can be, or the leaves can be used as a poultice for like stings, and you can like eat them in the spring to have like a lemony flavor. And much more to say. It's a great digestive bitter, but I think that's a good sort of roundup.
Beautiful, beautiful plant. All right, let's see what other medicine we've got out here. So I'll look at this beautiful patch of mugwort we have here. I'm not sure how well you can see this, but I'm sure you can see that this whole patch right here is of the same plant. And so that is our lovely next medicine that we're going to discuss. So here we have mugwort that goes by its botanical name, Artemisia vulgaris. You can differentiate this from the motherwort plant that looks somewhat similar by the white that it has underneath, that are or like the silvery gray that's composed of these like very fine white hairs that you can see. And that color refers to the lunar energy that points to the female reproductive system, and just the like it having a lot of medicine for female-bodied people. So what's in the name Artemisia, it's named after the goddess Artemis from Greek mythology, who is the goddess of the hunt, wild animals, birth, and children, which really encompasses a lot of its medicine. So having to do with like the hunt and wild animals, you can see that you'll find that she's usually located in the space between the wild and the more civilized human occupied spaces. And in having to do with birth and children, she targets the female reproduction system in a lot of medicine. And with that included, it helps to onset menstruation. It helps with cramping usually associated with menstruation, and it helps to support symptoms that go along with menopause. So it supports menopause, which is a very natural process. What else about this beautiful plant? So I like to think that Artemis embodies this sort of like strong female archetype that is very lacking in our world, in our patriarchal capitalist society at this day and age, which totally rejects feminine energies. And Artemisia vulgaris mugwort is a great plant for supporting the weekend feminine. So really, this is just like a special plant for the times in that way. So a little bit more about the botany. So to start, we have a smaller plant here. I'm hoping that some of you guys can see it. It's really small. It looks like parsley. The lobes are, or the margins are much more lobed. So this is a baby mugwort, and then it matures to this sharper lobed leaf. Yeah, it's a beautiful.
So it's gonna have that
side.
white underbelly.
Yeah, even from the beginning. And this is an annual, so so that means that it reaches maturity within its first year of growth, but it self-seeds really well. So you'll find that this plant is really abundant. I'm not sure if it's considered invasive, but yeah, it's an invasive plant, which, you know, if we don't mark on that as we go along, please like let us know, because that's important to know what you can harvest in abundance and what you should maybe be more cautious in harvesting. This plant, you can harvest kind of whenever the leaves are present, but it's best to harvest it later on in the summer when it reaches around its 5-foot height.
And you'll find this like growing in like city sidewalks all over the place. And the same with yellow dock. And yellow dock is also like considered invasive. So you can sort of like harvest at will. Yeah, so this is a little mugwort smudge that Adriana made. So this is a great alternative to white sage, which is over harvested. So you can just dry it in a bundle and like tie it up like this, and it is great at like cleansing the air and
negative
energy, and helps with like inducing like lucid dreaming. And if you want to like do some like dream work, mugwort is a great plant to work with.
Absolutely. And her smell is just unparalleled.
She's related to wormwood, which is what plant is used to make absinthe. So there's definitely some like hallucinatory family members in the Artemisia family.
All right, so that's a good amount about mugwort. Let's walk and see how long it takes for us to get to our next plant. Oh my god, that's so weird. This is
get very far.
Yeah, so this I'm going to cut a little bit of, but maybe we can just get a shot of where it's growing. This is a wild common blackberry, and it's just so you can see the sort of arching branch that we have here. That's very typical of this is a bramble, so it's like an arching branch that's typical of like the rubus species. So that includes like different roses, wild raspberry, stuff like that. So I cut off a piece here so that we can see that a little bit better. So I wanted to talk about this plant because we're all familiar with the fruit, right? But really all of the parts of this plant are medicine. So to begin, well, I guess all plants, meaning the flower, the leaves, the fruit that we're all familiar with, and then also the root bark. So I guess somewhere to start is like harvesting time. You would want to harvest the root either in the early spring or in the fall before frost. That would be the time where it has its energy in its root system just before putting its energy into other parts of the plant. So then you would want to harvest leaves shortly after. Once they start to appear, the plant is then putting its energy into its leaves, right, at that moment. And that would be early to mid-spring. The flowers you would then want to harvest from mid to late spring. And then the berries, of course, that would be later summer, before then being able, blackberry. Oh, is someone confused about that? No. Yeah, this is the common blackberry. So this is, the name for this one is Rubus alleganiensis. The blackberry that's cultivated that we're all familiar with is a hybridized version of blackberry called Rubus fruticosa. And that's the one we see mostly in supermarkets, but it's really similar in medicinal value. It really just has like a larger fruit to enjoy. So here it's really interesting because you're seeing a lot of the different stages of growth. You're seeing the flower, and then you're seeing in the middle here in the flower we have all of these little pistils in the middle, which are which contain the ovules, which is the female reproductive part. And then on the outside, there are a lot of stamens, and that's the male reproductive part. That's where you'll find the pollen. And then in a later stage, you'll see here all the smaller beads of the ovaries starting to swell to look like the blackberry, if you can see that. So the medicine that we have here is the flower essence, which it's medicine that we're not really going to go into right now, maybe in another workshop, but the flower essence works in a more like energetic, emotional level, and that is targeted for people that have a tendency for procrastination, that are looking to become more assertive. The fruit and the leaves have a lot of testing backing it. The leaves and the root are very astringent, and they're very antimicrobial. The leaves can be used in infusions to help tone the gastrointestinal tract and the colon. The fruit are very rich in antioxidants. The young leaves, so not the mature leaves, the young leaves are also very rich in antioxidants, which scavenge free radicals that can potentially turn into cancer. Those specific cancers that it targets are esophageal, cervical, and breast cancers. And there's some tests supporting that as well. So for the sake of, the leaves would mostly be used as an infusion. So when we say infusion, we mean it can be either cold or hot. Typically hot. We would be talking about a hot infusion in this time. And you would be seeping a plant material in hot water for 3, sometimes to 8 or more hours. So that's what we mean when we talk about an infusion. The leaves also, because it's antimicrobial and astringent, they're really good. They can be used as a mouthwash to tighten gums that are loose. It's just, there's so much medicine in this, it's hard to really like cover it all, but really what we want to express is that something that is so common, just one part, there can be a lot of medicine in other parts and in other phases of that plant. So anyway, on to the next medicine.
Follow us.
Yeah.
Or we'll follow you.
Yeah, so
we've got a beautiful view of the lake down here.
We got some more brambles over here of the Rosa multiflora, which is an invasive species in this area. So again, related to the blackberry that we just saw. You can tell by the arching brambles that it has.
It can also be like harvested. The petals can be harvested, the rose hips can be harvested, but they're not going to be as big. Mm-hmm. And we're walking under a willow tree right now. I think most of you know how to identify a willow.
Can you hear us? Okay.
So we're not going to talk too much about this, but an interesting factoid is that it is high in salicylates, which is one of the compounds that was used to make aspirin. So you will find like willow bark on the herbal market as like an anti-inflammatory pain remedy.
Yeah, it works somewhat differently to aspirin. It doesn't have like really an acute response or like an acute action. It doesn't work so immediately. You would have to take it over a period of time for it to really take effect.
Moving along.
Moving along. Yeah, I mean, if anyone has any questions at this time, let us know, or maybe we can take a moment to look at that while we're looking at other stuff.
Just a quick little...
There's one question.
We have a question.
Someone asked about the mugwort. Would you make a tea with mugwort?
Oh, yes, thank you. So a lot of the time you want to dry the plant material, especially leafy material, when you want to make a tea out of it, because the tea can extract the compounds that you want better when the plant material is dried. So generally, yes, you want to make a tea with the dried plant material, and there are a lot of ways to dry the plant material that we can talk about maybe at another time.
Yeah, it tastes bitter, so you just have to prepare for that, but that's also part of its medicine.
Yeah, generally bitter also means that it has an action on the digestive system as well, which we didn't really discuss, but there's just like a lot more medicine in all of the plants than we are able to cover right now.
Bitters.
Yeah.
We do have another one.
Oh, we do.
For willow bake and anti-pain, is there another herb or herbs that have more immediate pain remedy action?
Yeah. That's a good question.
CBD, California poppy are good. Kava, and these all have sort of like overlapping actions with other things, so it depends like what's good for you. But
and
turmeric,
right, and these also work topically and internally. So thinking of different ways that you can prepare and take in this plant medicine.
Depends what's going on for you, but there's definitely options.
Is there any
making dogwood?
Is it safe for children? Soraya asked.
Mugwort.
The mugwort or the?
I guess any of the.
You just want to like. There's a way to like figure
for
out.
Pain.
Oh, for pain.
Yeah, specifically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just want to like. There's a way to figure out like, using like the body weight of a child, and it's usually like divided by 3 the dosage, but you'll just want to look it up. But generally, things are like safe for children.
Yeah, generally things are safe for children. In that case, dosage is very important, like Hayley was saying. And then you definitely have to like research or ask a practiced herbalist whether that is the case for specific herbs, because some of them are just maybe too risky to try and not worth it. They wouldn't be dangerous in a way that would be maybe, detrimental, but maybe causing nausea and all of these other side effects that are not.
Chamomile and catnip are really like pleasant like herbs for kids.
Yeah.
But moving along.
There's one more.
Oh, one more. Okay.
Any neem plants here?
Not plants, not that I know of. But yeah, it's an interesting question.
That's definitely useful.
Mm-hmm.
We've definitely used it
what are
on our indoor plants to help with pesticides, but that speaks to its like antibacterial, and it's very like pungent and aromatic.
Yeah, let's move on.
So this is birch. Also, I'm not going to go too in depth, but a little fun thing to do. Most people are like familiar with birch because of the bark, the peely kind of bark. So the black birch is going to have more of this, but you can just like cut a little twig, and it'll have like a wintergreen flavor. I'm gonna put it on.
Yeah, it's antimicrobial. So, and also like so for example, the leaves of the blackberry are great as a mouthwash because of its antimicrobial and astringent properties. The birch is antimicrobial and is actually cleaning your teeth.
Yeah. Like a toothpick.
Yeah, licorice root also works very well as like a substitute for toothpaste.
But this one will be very easy to find.
Yeah. If you want to know more about herbal dentistry, Leslie Anderson has a great book out called Herbal Dentistry. Okay, we have calamus here. So you might have to come with me over here. So I actually transplanted this plant from a colony of calamus that we have just over this hill. I don't know if anyone is familiar with this plant. It's not that commonly known. for the sake of not uprooting it, because the medicine that we have here is from the rhizome, which I'll explain just now. Ooh, it got a little smushed in my backpack. But so, just so we can generally see, so to ID this, it has like red along the base. It's very, very aromatic. It has a very particular aromatic smell. It's aromatic, it's pungent, it's acrid, and it's bitter. So the rhizome, what I was talking about, is the part used. You don't see that here, but it's an underground stem, so not to be confused with a root. That's the part that's used as medicine primarily. The strongest medicine is this part right here, where the rhizome would meet the leaf. You can cut about like a teaspoon of that and chew it for upset stomachs or nervous stomachs. What else about this plant? It's such a beautiful one. Yeah, so it loves to grow in very wet, swampy lands. And it's primarily used for conditions of damp stagnation. So an example of that is brain fog. So clearing the mind in Ayurveda, which is the Indian modality of herbal medicine, it's known as vacha, which means to speak, because this plant supports that part of the body. It supports specifically the trachea, which the rhizome actually looks like. So that would be what Hayley was discussing earlier, the doctrine of signature, or the way that is spoken of more recently is the language of plants. So looking like the trachea, it helps for people to find their voice, to cultivate their voice, and to increase creativity. Another interesting factoid about calamus as medicine is that Walt Whitman actually was greatly inspired by Leaves of Grass, specifically in discussion of calamus and in his use of calamus. So that kind of expresses the potential that it has to increase creativity. It was even said that that it was not him, but actually calamus that wrote all of that beautiful poetry. And then, yes, thank you, Hayley. So another really important and lovely point about calamus. Oh, and then also, I don't know if you can see these little ridges right here, but that is another botanical marker that this is calamus and not other types of grass. But yeah, when you see calamus, usually they grow in colonies. They grow asexually by rhizome, or that is specifically the Acorus calamus species, which is non-native, versus the Acorus americanus that is native and can grow via seed as well as by rhizome. And whenever you find calamus, specifically larger colonies of calamus, that generally means that Native Americans were living in that area, because that was a very popular plant and sacred plant to the Native Americans. So moving on.
Annalisa said it looks like lemongrass.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it has they're both very aromatic. And I mean, you can smell their aroma just from the leaves when you're walking by it. It's the smell of the leaves is what you get from the rhizome, but a much milder smell.
Smells good.
Yeah. I'm gonna take a little bit right now for my nervous stomach.
I'm gonna eat my bark.
She's brushing her teeth, and I'm assisting my nervous stomach right now. So let's see what else we have.
So we're just making our way down the path.
We have all of the sensitive fern here that's kind of taking over, if you're familiar with that plant. And actually the sensitive fern is competing with our colony of calamus that we have up there. Yeah, this sensitive fern. So we've been working to maintain that very sacred space by weeding out or thinning out the sensitive fern that we have there. So see, about a teaspoon. I'm just going to chew on it. Okay.
So I'm looking for a dandelion that has some
like
above ground growth. But
let's see. Oh, here we go. Perfect.
Okay, so Taraxacum officinale. People, view this as a sort of pesky weed, but it's actually like a powerhouse medicinal weed. All of it is edible. One of the ways to identify it, I think most people, can identify it, but sometimes you won't have the flower. You'll just have the leaf. So the leaf is deeply serrated, and the serrations and like the points point downwards. So they can vary a little bit in the way they look, the different like serrations. Some like are spikier than others, and some will have this like reddish midrib. But the leaf can be eaten in salads. It can be dried. In the spring is when it's like most tasty. It can be dried and used as medicine. It's a gentle diuretic. So it supports the kidney. A lot of like high blood pressure medications are diuretics, but they deplete your potassium. Dandelion leaf will not deplete any of your essential minerals. So you can find it in a lot of like high blood pressure formulas. And then you have the flower, which is edible. You can add it to salads. There's a lot of like interesting recipes like dandelion fritters that use the flower. You can also soak this in steep this in oil for like 4 to 6 weeks, and it has anti-inflammatory capabilities for like sore muscles as like a topical use. And then yes, it's nice close up. Anybody hasn't seen dandelion before, there it is.
You're looking at it through new eyes.
Are you critiquing my camera work?
So the root is going to be like most roots is going to be harvested in early spring or the fall. And the root is like super medicinal. Once you harvest it, dandelion is considered invasive, so you can just like harvest at will. It has this like white latexy substance when you break the root. Obviously you can't see it right now, but that is inulin. It's a prebiotic. It feeds your gut bacteria, so it's not a probiotic. It doesn't have the actual bacteria, but it'll provide food for your gut bacteria. That also speaks to its affinity with the liver. It's a great like detoxifier, supporting your liver to do the work that it needs to do. It's very commonly found in like digestive bitters blends. You can harvest it, cut it up first, and then dry it, because once it gets dried, roots get really hard to cut. And then you can tincture it and do an alcohol extract. You can do a decoction, which is like a long simmer, or you can powder it and make has a really great flavor, kind of like mimics coffee. So I know Adriana and I love to drink Dandy-Blend,
Sure do.
which is a nice coffee substitute, super tasty. And yeah, I think that's about it for Dandelion. I don't know if Adriana, you had anything to add.
I mean, I think that covers it. I think that it's interesting to notice that the chicory leaf looks really similar to dandelion. They are often coupled together. There's actually chicory root also in the Dandy Blend that we love to get.
We're not sponsored by Dandy.
We're not. We're definitely not. It's also, I mean, something we just haven't gotten around to trying ourselves is making it on our own. So for it to have that sort of coffee-like flavor, you have to roast it. Yeah. You have to roast both of the roots, and you can either powder it to use later, or you can roast it and then use as a decoction, which Hayley, as Hayley mentioned, is like a low simmer, low boil that you do for like 10 minutes or much longer, depending on what the plant material is and what constituents you're trying to extract.
So yeah, these are all dandelion leaves, so you can see they vary, but pretty unmistakable.
Great medicine.
And yeah, harvest at will. It will like self-seed, freely take over. So it's great to use as medicine.
Yeah, and another great example of a plant with all different plant parts having medicine and at different phases of its growth.
Mm-hmm.
So,
any questions?
Yeah.
In the chat?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Right, that's all right.
No questions here.
We'll see how long it takes to find our next medicine.
Catherine Ellington actually pointed out a while ago that flavonoids are also in willow, and willow contains
Anti-inflammatory. Flavonoids are anti-inflammatory, so
that helps with the pain relieving.
Should I eat this?
Yeah, I'm giving them a little bit of calamus to chew on.
Mac, when we give Mac things to eat, he always makes sure to ask if he can eat it.
I just want to point out that nature will prevail, as we see here.
Do you know what that is?
I think it's actually the steeplebush spirea, or Spirea tomentosa, which is growing all around here like this. It's a really beautiful steeplebush shaped inflorescence, or what is called the blooming part of the plant. So that's not what, I don't know much about the medicine there, but beautiful, beautiful plant. All right, so.
We have a question.
Oh, we do?
Do you know, Jordan Longo asked, do you know if many or any public parks up here in NY in general are sprayed with pesticides?
That's a really good question. We did just move to the area. We've sort of limited our activity to like our property for this time, it being the pandemic and everything else. So we haven't really ventured off of our own property.
It's really hard to find that information.
Yeah, it's good to
Even
assume.
in a city, it's hard to know.
Yeah, I mean, we've both lived the past like 4+ years in New York City, and it's just better to assume there at least that pesticides are being used. I mean, coupled with like pollution, there's just a lot to.
And I've gotten in trouble for foraging parts.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Brings up a whole other conversation about foraging.
We do have one more question.
Yeah.
How can we tell ragweed from mugwort?
I think ragweed has a yellow flower. Yeah, they look pretty distinct.
I mean, I think the white under the leaves, like we said, is pretty on the underside of the mugwort is the telltale sign that it's mugwort. Yeah. Also, if you give it a smell, it has that wormwood. That wormwood aroma.
Really distinct aroma.
Yeah.
Licorice?
No.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, not like licorice.
Low kind of deep earthy smell.
Yeah. So
not licorice. So this is yarrow. This will be our next plant.
Yes. So here we're choosing this patch because we have a few different phases of growth. We have last season's growth right here. Oops, sorry. Forgetting I have to use this thing. So last season's growth here, and then we have the new growth here that is just starting to flower, and then I actually just picked this little guy, sorry, that is starting to open up its blooms. So as you can see the difference here, as it's starting to flower, it starts to flatten out its corym, which is the type of inflorescence or bloom style that it has here. So we can see how here it's rounded and here it starts to flatten out. So another name for yarrow is Achillea millefolium. That's the botanical name. Achillea refers to Achilles, which this plant is named after because in Greek mythology, it was said that Achilles at birth was dipped into a vat of yarrow infusion by his mother, and it was said that it was the hand that held his ankle that was the cause of his Achilles heel or his weak spot. It was also said that Achilles used yarrow infusion to heal a lot of his fellow warriors. And that points to its medicine as an absolute essential herbal first aid. And its main action in doing that, along with many others, but its most valued in that respect, is its action as a styptic, or its ability to staunch blood, specifically deeper wounds. It's also antimicrobial, but it's probably better to clean out the wound before applying the yarrow, to get out some like larger particles and stuff like that. This plant is just, there's so much to say. I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed because this plant is just also referred to as the master of blood. It supports menstruation. It like in cases of menorrhagia, which is like over like excess pure like bleeding in menstruation, it helps to regulate that, for example. Really in all cases involving blood in herbalism, this plant is used.
Yeah, this is a great, its leaves are super like feathery and soft, and that's where the millefolium, it's like the leaf of 1,000 leaves.
Yeah, leaf parts.
Leaf parts. So you can see it has all these tiny little leaves on it. And this is a great one, you know, if you're just herbal first aid, if you're out on a hike. This grows in a lot of like meadows. If you get like a bee sting, a bug bite that's itchy, a small wound, you can just like chew this up and make a spit poultice and put it right on whatever you're treating. And it's also has a bitter flavor. So it does have some affinity for the digestive system, blood thinning properties, as Adriana said. So it's great if you're like prone to clots. Definitely my favorite herb right now, being like out in the country.
Yeah, it's a great one. This guy also likes to grow in disturbed soils, but also very well drained soils. And the soil type that we have in this lower part of this property is it's very rich in sand. It's very sand, very well drained. So we find a lot of that in this part of the property. Oh, I guess also harvesting. It's best to harvest when this plant is in flower. So that's like late spring on to late fall. It just kind of like, it just kind of keeps flowering, not successively from the same plant, but just like the separate plants keep flowering during that time. You can also use, so you want the top third of the plant while the aerial parts are flowering, the whole aerial part while it's flowering, but you can use the leaves when it's not flowering as well. The only challenge with that is you must know your botanical IDing, because it does somewhat resemble poison hemlock, which as the plant points to is poisonous. It does look more like wild carrot, which is another great medicine, but yeah, it's just, you know, important to know your botanical IDing if you're just going to be harvesting the leaves and not have the obvious inflorescence to guide you in knowing that this is yarrow.
Yeah. Also, like it's a diaphoretic. It's the classic like fever remedy is yarrow, elderflower, and either spearmint or peppermint. So I'll use this as a fresh plant material, as like an alcohol extract, as a tincture if I feel something coming on. It's great for like oral health, to like add to like a gargle, because it's so antibacterial. So it's great to have on hand if you're feeling like achy, malaise, bluish, help you sweat things out.
Yeah, I think another thing to just add on to, so its preparation in first aid, it's best for it to be either dried and powdered when it's applied as a styptic to staunch bleeding, or to be tinctured as a fresh plant. Those are the two best preparations for that. Yeah.
That's yarrow, everybody.
Yeah. Such a great plant. Again, it's so hard to be so like limited and talking about each of these plants because there's just so much more to say. Yeah.
But yeah, if anybody has additional questions, we can take them right now. And we'll provide like more resources after.
Yeah. I guess we can talk a little bit more at the end, but yeah, we are both clinical herbalists. We have our own websites that you can visit to hear a little bit more about our own individual philosophies and practices. Yeah.
Are we getting any questions in the chat, Matt?
Let's see. Trying to walk and
yeah, our IT man is trying to walk backwards for us here.
Yeah.
We're entering into a non-weeded.
If you find yourself looking at
medicine.
Oh, yeah. How can we forget about you?
This beautiful medicine that we have here. This is Boneset. So I'll talk a little bit about the IDing here, and then maybe you can tag team me with some of the medicine. Sure. So this is Boneset, or Eupatorium perfoliatum. So the name, I guess we can start with, perfoliatum is because it has these fused leaves, if you can see that here. It gives it an appearance that the stem is actually piercing through these leaves that are alternating downwards. So the leaf arrangement is alternate here. The top of the leaves are very rough and almost reptilian looking. It's very interesting to see in person. And underneath it can be like resinous and bumpy. I don't know if you can see that very well, but this is a very, very cool plant. Easy to look past.
Yeah, and it's a native plant. So we only have a couple of these on the property, so we're not going to be harvesting it for medicine. And I actually like to clear out some of the surrounding competing plants, just to give it room to breathe and encourage it to grow. So it's medicinal. It's a great for literally setting bones. If you have Adriana's partner right now does have a broken or fractured rib, so that's going to be part of his protocol. Taking it as a tea and potentially as a tincture. There's many ways you can take it. You can dip like a cloth in a long steeped infusion and just lay it on the part of the body. So it's really helpful for building bones. And it's known to treat breakbone fever, which was a fever associated with malaria. But yeah, it's really great for any the achiness that comes with cold and flu.
Yeah, it's interesting to make the association that this plant likes wet soil as well, and breakbone fever was a condition of wet environments of North America that is no longer as prevalent right now. Another botanical shore ID is how hairy this stem is. And the parts that we use here are the aerial parts in flower. So this we won't be harvesting it, as Hayley said, but if you were to harvest it, you would do it later on in the summer when the inflorescence or blooms are in full flower. And again, you would be using about the top 1/3 of the plant.
Yeah, this is one that we want to try to in the garden, so we can use it.
Yeah, it's also just so great for relieving symptoms of flu and cold in general. It's sort of unparalleled with its like how it works as a diaphoretic. Just another one kind of similar as yarrow to use in colds and to relieve symptoms.
Very bitter
related to that.
So
very bitter.
Prepare yourself.
Yes.
We have a question from Michael Maier. Does Whole Foods carry good quality herbal supplements, or do you have to order everything online?
That's a good question. There are a couple like reliable brands that we have like learned in class, and Whole Foods does carry some of them.
I would support local herbal stores.
I'm pretty sure
there's
Whole
a lot
Foods
of
is on the list of companies that have prison labor, so
yeah, no to Whole
processed.
Foods. There are, I mean, as herbalism is gaining popularity, along with like the desire to fish and all of these other really great activities that reincorporate a relationship with nature, there are more stores locally that are arising, and I would encourage you to find out what stores are in your area,
and local apothecaries
and herbalists.
And some of these things can be grown, you know, in your garden or on a fire escape. Yarrow definitely is super easy to cultivate, and it just feels good to be able to like grow and make your own medicine. It's very rewarding experience. So Michael, I know you have a garden. Try it out. So we're almost to our next suspect.
So we got to weed whack that area. Sorry about that. That was a bit of a
definitely
struggle.
Going to be doing a tick check after this.
So maybe we can get a little bit closer to Hayley here.
Well, precarious over here. So I am crouched on a dead hemlock tree, and we have a reishi mushroom growing on it, Ganoderma Lucidum, which means Ganoderma means shiny skin, and Lucidum refers to the hemlock tree. So Ganoderma Lucidum specifically grows on hemlock trees. There's another more popular reishi mushroom that's used in Chinese medicine. That's Ganoderma Lucidum, and that grows on hardwoods, and it's actually a lot more rare in the Northeast. So most of the reishi mushrooms you'll find are Ganoderma Lucidum. They're almost interchangeable. There's debate whether they're even like different, just varieties of the same species, it seems that people are saying. So this one is not the greatest specimen. It's being eaten by a slug. You can see all this like gooey slug trails around. So normally it'll have like a smooth margin, and it has this beautiful red, orange, yellow spectrum. So this is prime reishi harvesting time in the Northeast.
Sure is.
Adriana and I went out the other day harvesting, and I do have some dried in my backpack. Let's see. So it's akin harvesting reishi. You can just like cut it off, or you can just kind of pop it off. It's akin to harvesting the fruit of a plant. So the mycelium, or like the underground root network, will stay intact. But when you are harvesting, you do want to leave a couple of fruiting bodies behind just to ensure spore production. So when harvesting, you want to harvest them, slice them immediately so they don't dry up. And then we put them in a dehydrator. So this is like an example of a dehydrated slice. You can also just dry them on screens. And these will be decocted. So long simmer, several hours, as long as the taste is still bitter.
And color still apparent.
Yeah. Our teacher, Richard Mandelbaum, really likes reishi and decoctions, and I know there's a lot of like mushroom tinctures and capsules on the market, but he thinks that the decoction is really the best way to get the medicine. Tincturing, you can do like a double extract where you're decocting the mushroom and then using the mushroom again to tincture it, so you're pulling out more constituents. Richard thinks that it's not
not really necessary. And it's very bitter, so you're getting that bitter medicine. So it's an adaptogen. It's pretty popular if you're into like medicinal mushrooms. So it really works on the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis in the body. So it is calming to the nervous system, but it's also immunomodulating. So it's like amphoteric or like balancing to the immune system. So it can be used for hyper or hypo immune conditions, hyper being like allergies, hypo meaning like cancer or HIV, and autoimmune conditions have like aspects of both hyper and hypo. So reishi would be a great option for like autoimmune conditions. It also has an affinity for the cardiovascular system. It can thin the blood. It can reduce blood lipid levels. Great for like cardiovascular disease and prevention. You can take it also as a powder. It's really has a nice flavor. You put in like your coffee. But it's very gentle. It has like a lot of scientific research on its treatment of cancer. But it is very gentle at the end of the day. So yeah, we're not going to harvest this one because it is just not looking too good.
She's been claimed by nature already, so we're going to let her be.
I don't know if there's anything else I'm missing.
I mean, I think you did a great job. I think that you hit on all the big points. I feel like just with all of our other plants, there's so much to say. So I think that she did a great job. I think we can just maybe very momentarily appreciate jewelweed that we have over here. I'm sure a lot of our people here from upstate New York are familiar with this plant, with the abundance of poison ivy that we have. And actually that's something that we didn't mention about mugwort, but both mugwort and jewelweed can be used as like poultices. So just like really crushing it up, you can add some of your saliva as well to make it more liquidy, but really just crushing it up is fine, especially the jewelweed that is already very moist, and then applying it preventatively when you think that you're going to be around poison ivy, or once you've made contact with the poison ivy, to try to get rid of those fixed oils that get stuck on the skin. So this is jewelry. Sorry, I crushed it before really showing you. So that's what we have. Yeah, and mugwort. And then another really fun fact before we move on, since we brought up mugwort, is that mugwort and yarrow were previously used to make beer before the Puritans came in and decided to make it a law for only hops to be used, since they have the bitter sort of descending component. Plants like yarrow and mugwort and other plants that are more aphrodisiac and euphoric were previously used, and the Puritans were not very happy about the way that was affecting the public. So that's an interesting little beer fact. We haven't made beer with yarrow or mugwort ourselves, but we will definitely do that this year.
One sec, it appears we're frozen, so I'm gonna.
Oh, can you hear us at least?
Yeah, they can hear.
Okay.
Let me just.
Yeah, makes sense that our connection is not getting as good here, but hopefully.
Let me just try something really quick.
All right. Should we try just going back? Are we good? We're with the audio and everything.
Yep.
Can you see us? Can you hear us?
Thumbs up if you can see. Okay.
Yeah?
Great. Yep,
Okay, cool.
Got a thumbs up.
We have one more plant ally that we want to go through, and then maybe we can take some final questions and gather some conclusive thoughts. Does anyone know what this plant is? Pine.
You all got it wrong.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a beautiful plant. She is so abundant in this area. I mean, I guess just like a point that I love starting with is Jody Noe, if you're familiar with her. She's a naturopathic doctor, just like a really incredible practitioner in the herbal realm. She claims pine to be the plant for COVID right now, both in prevention and treatment. Of course, this is all educational, right? So the medicine here is the needles that are here that are modified leaves, and then the root bark and pitch. Pitch is just another word for resin specific to pine. So I can even show, well, maybe Hayley wants to talk about the needles really quickly.
Yeah, so these needles come in groups of 5 generally. So that's a good way to ID it. So you can just like pluck it off. They're 5. So that's another, ID factoid.
So the needles are really rich in vitamin C, and they're great to make an infusion. So here we're talking about a hot infusion of a minimum of 5 minutes, but generally you want 20 minutes or more. They are great for the onset of colds and flus. So this would be a great one to have right now in once you start getting those initial cold and flu symptoms to prevent it from moving forwards.
And we recently had to cut down a pine by the house because it was dropping branches and it was posing a danger, but we were able to harvest a bunch of resin. So the resin is highly antimicrobial, can even be used as like a patch for wounds, like putting it directly on a wound, or you can chew on it. So we harvested the resin, and the resin is like what the tree uses to patch its own wounds. So you want to make sure if you're harvesting from a live tree that you're not taking too much, because the tree does need it to patch its wounds. So we made a salve with pine by double boiling the resin into oil, and then adding beeswax, and that made a nice wound balm.
And then in terms of harvesting, the needles are available all year round. There are people that will say that in the summertime it's actually best to collect the needles. It certainly is best to collect the pitch or resin in the early spring or late fall when the pitch is sort of running through the plant. And then another note that Hayley touched on is how willingly she offers herself to us by how like rigid the branches are. It's very typical to see fallen branches of pine along the ground. So it's best to harvest what's already fallen. The pitch does stay in the branch for a fairly long period of time. So specifically if you want the pitch, look for fallen branches. And then, harvesting in those specific times. Oh, and then another medicinal point of the pitch is it's so potential treatment, potential for remedying COVID is its action of attaching itself to mucus in the lung area and helping to expel that.
Can be great as like a facial steam. So pouring boiling water over the bark and the needles and just like drooping a towel over your head and breathing in the vapor. That's like a really nice remedy. And also can be used as a smudge. It's a very like abundant plant. It is native. So just like take stock of what is in the area. But generally pine is super abundant. It's probably the most common plant tree we have here.
Angelina asked, how do you extract the pitch?
So I can maybe just show you. So again, like you want to be looking for branches that have fallen. And you generally not want to use a part of the branch that is so thin, but you'll typically, with the larger pines, find very large branches that have fallen. But just for the sake of showing you how it's done, so I've cut off a piece of the pine branch right now, and if you have just like a knife that you can use, cutting away from yourself, and it's the surface bark and then the pitch or resin that is just underneath that. So really just shaving it. I mean, you're not going to be able to see here, and it's not going to have it in abundance because this is such a juvenile plant, but like you can see some of it like oozing there.
And you can smell it.
Yeah, you can really
Super
smell it,
aromatic.
but you can see some of like the oozing right there. So really just like shaving all of the bark and collecting that. It's best to dry before using, especially if you're using as a decoction. Sort of for the reasons that I mentioned before, when you are extracting with water, you want to remove the water generally from the plant to facilitate extracting compounds with like the newly introduced water. But yeah, like I just shaved this and it just smells so abundantly.
And yeah,
of the
medicine
pitch.
all
It's
year
amazing.
long, as Adriana said.
So antimicrobial. Very sticky though, so it's best to harvest the pitch with proper gloves because now I'm going to be sticky for a while. But yeah, I think that's it for our walk. But if we want to like have any final questions, either about what we covered or about ourselves, if not, maybe we can just like sort of tie some points together on foraging, how, I mean, maybe there are some people, specifically more of our kettle space folks here, and maybe other people that are living in more urban setting at the moment, and the potential that there is for foraging to provide for a greater community and ecology in urban settings. And part of that is lowering food waste, lowering product waste, lowering carbon emissions from importing different foods, increasing self-sufficiency and reliability of foraging your own plants, being more self-sustainable in the sense of being more financially, being able to save. Sorry, you have a dragonfly in your pants. I lost my train of thought. But then, of course, with all of that, so it has so many potentials for like a future where people are foraging in urban settings and in general are already becoming really popularized. You know, there are jobs that are coveted of people foraging for high-end restaurants, and I mean, in that way, it's really interesting. But it applying to an urban setting is an interesting conversation to have. There are a lot of questions that go along with that, like concerns of soil quality, pollutants, like Hayley said before, pesticide use, which you just kind of have to assume, especially in urban settings, is sort of abound. But it just has its potential positives outweigh the current negatives that there are, and these are sort of discussions that we should be having, and then speaking sort of like the fundamentals of like how foraging began, and working to dismantle that and create this new world that we want to live in.
Yeah, less reliant on the medical and food industrial complex that many of us have been failed by. So is there any questions?
Let's see here. Claire said, thanks, so informative. Love your focus on foraging invasive species.
Oh, great. And yeah, if you want to keep in touch with us, put your